Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to our second panel of the afternoon. I hope you enjoyed our first panel about the collateral of the future. Going after that panel in showbiz terms is a little bit like singing after Elvis Presley, which is a perfect transition for my next guest. For those who don't know who Jeff Kidwell is, he's president of Jeff Kidwell Consultings. He's been around for a couple of months, maybe a couple of years. He's spotted all over the world. He is the moderator of this panel, which will be discussing Repo, tech trends. I see you, Jeff, that you are smiling. So unfortunately, we can't grab a beer, but that will be the next time we meet up. The panel is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I guess all of you have seen me at one point or another in my almost 39 years now in the repo and securities lending business. It's funny, I started in IT. I don't think anybody of the 400 people registered knows that. But I actually started at IT at Morgan Stanley in their MIS program. And we had a voice recognition project before anybody even thought about technology in 1982. So they put 5 of us in a dark room with no windows and really old computers, direct access, floppy disk, the whole bit with the green writing. And we were supposed to recognize the traders as they called in their tickets, and it would be automated. It wasn't automated. It was 5 people sitting in a room who were typing in tickets, and they never got to see us because we were way in the back and there were no windows in the room. So that was the technology that I dealt with when I first came to the industry. It has advanced dramatically, and partly because of the 3 thought leaders that are on my panel. And so I want to introduce them. To my, let's see, below me is Jerome Cardon. He's the senior repo product manager at Broadridge. Broadridge, I'm sure everybody's heard of, kind of does everything. And it's also a listed company and has been around a long time. So has Jerome. Jerome has been in the industry for 20 years as consultant in investment banking, worked at several different banks that we know, Lloyd's, RBS, Capco Inc., Deutsche Bank, et cetera, and has worked very closely with other European financial institutions. He is remarkably strong on fintech, and we're going to have a great discussion. To my, let's see, to the left here is Camille McAuliffe, and she joins us from Market Access. Market Access is another one of those companies that does everything fintechy, pretty much has touched every aspect of it. She heads up the STP business development team and is responsible for delivering automated solutions to clients across the buy and sell side to their post-trade challenges. She's been at Market Access for 7 years, and prior to that, 10 years in various investment banks. We all have investment bank backgrounds too. And then last but not least is my friend Sal Giglio in the lower corner. This is sort of like Hollywood Squares. He works for GLMX, which is Global Liquidity Management, right? So that was the original name for it. And GLMX actually comes right out of Silicon Valley. So Greg Havlicek was a programmer in Silicon Valley and started the company. And they've done a lot with an electronic trading platform and have branched out to include sell-side customers as well. And buy-side customers, sorry. Include buy-side customers. So as we kick this off, got these 3 great panelists. I'm the entertainer, and we want to make you feel like you're looking at a living room and we're having a discussion, and you just have to be eavesdropping in on that. But please feel free to ask questions as well. So I want to begin. There are a lot of subjects we could have covered for repo trends and repo tech. I've been involved in fintech in all 3 companies that I worked for in one form or another. I think RepoLink, Counterfeits, Direct Repo. So there's a lot of different directions we could take. We're going to start out, though, with what's happened with the pandemic. The pandemic has forced a lot of technology changes. I know Camille has been on top of that, feeling the lifeblood of it. So I'm going to start with her, and we're going to jump in on each other to make this a real lively discussion. We just had this discussion a week ago. We could have actually just recorded it. Go ahead, Camille.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and you really teed us up nicely there. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Yeah, and I think COVID definitely has been catalyst for a change, a long needed change. I think when we were chatting last week, we kind of all agreed that the biggest conundrum to us and to me certainly is where we are, why we are where we are in repo, and why we haven't kind of got further forward. And you look at kind of the real world and where I can pay you money immediately, no problem, but it takes us this X amount of time to settle a transaction and these kind of things, and from execution through to through from front to back processing. It kind of it puzzles me as to why it's taken us so long and why we're still on that journey, because unlike back in those early days when the technology wasn't there was folks like you keying in things in the back side room. It is there today. There are tools available out there. There's so much technology that can enable this. It's an enigma why we aren't further forward. But the good news is, I don't want to be negative and start the panel on a low note. But yeah, the good news is that this has prompted change, and we're on the right track, I think.
Jerome, you agree that there's been some kind of, I don't know, it's frustration, is it? I mean, we all know that there's eventual adaptation that's necessary, but it is kind of frustrating how slow it moves, or how it hasn't moved before.
Yeah, I completely agree. But so there hasn't been movements in line with technology, and there are many reasons that can be looked into, structural. So if the movements were going to create disintermediation, then clearly the players would resist it and that sort of thing. But definitely, if I completely agree that if we look at 20 years ago, the best technology that you could see, the best examples of technology you could see were in the trading rooms. And 20 years later, it's definitely not the case that that technology has brought all these changes, despite the fact that it could have. So I completely agree.
Right. Is that because the business leaders are looking at a P&L and they're saying, well, this is an expense, rather than a cost-benefit analysis to show that it's actually going to save them a lot of money over time? I was asking that to Jerome or Kubia.
I think it's that, but it's also disruption. So technology is a disruptor in most cases, and a repo was really a relationship business, where you knew who you were trading for, and you had a certain number of rules that you would follow in terms of substitution. So you would not substitute anything beyond that, at that level or worse credit than what you had. So it used to be that, and technology is disruption, and when it comes to disruption, you want to be careful about whether your business model can adjust and adapt to that disruption. And I think that's really where the resistance is what is it going to mean to my business model? And I think this is where, in my mind, the change is happening now, not because people necessarily want it, but because they have to, because the regulation is forcing that change. And a whole raft of regulations are bringing all these changes. You need to capture everything electronically. You need to make sure that you don't have the appearance of an old boys network agreeing on things, which pushes electronification. So yeah, I think the resistance was coming from there, and is definitely now regulatory driven disappearing.
And Sal, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sal.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to add, and I think we're all in agreement here, and I've never been accused of taking the brighter side of things, but although there has been resistance in the past, and it's a complicated product, repo is probably the most complicated, simple product out there in capital markets. It does feel like, over the last 5 to 7 years, that there is a recognition that technology brings value to trading desks. So in the past, there was resistance, partly because traders and salespeople didn't understand the value aspect and the ability that technology had to lever their offering, and as well as a knowledge that the ability to connect platforms now is much easier, especially in our product, than it was in the past. So standard industry protocols, I think many firms are comfortable with, whether it's other products, but more importantly, the idiosyncratic nature of repo. We're starting to be able to handle a lot of the more complicated workflow. So, I think there is, a lot of room for us to move forward. There certainly is. So I take the positive view that, over the next 5 years, we're going to make some significant progress compared to the past 5 years.
Okay, and just to add to that, you said something about low touch, no touch that you're actually looking at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the adoption to electronic trading, especially in the dealer to client space, has grown dramatically over the last 18 months, I'd say, especially propelled by the work from home environment. Overnight, everyone was sitting in their bedroom, living room, basement, connecting with everyone around the world. So there was an acknowledgement of the power of technology, but also the acknowledgement that there was a need for better connectivity and a better way of processing their existing workflow. So adoption of our platform and some other platforms really accelerated through the pandemic. I think we're at a point now where it's no going back, and we're going to see increased adoption going forward. Based off of that, we've seen some forward-looking companies out there, bigger companies, building algos and technology that supports low-touch trading, which we see going through the platform today.
Jerome?
I'd agree with that, but I think even prior to the lockdown and this current situation that we're experiencing, which is really very different from the world that we knew. But even before that, I think that since the advent of Basel, transformation, it has put the repo desk in a very different place inside the bank landscape.
Is that the Basel 2, 3, or 4?
Basel 3. It has really created a very different context in which the repo desk has now become central because it manages that collateralization, the value of the collateral, which is in interacting with the cost of capital through the funding of the collateralization of the exposures. And so the point I'm making is that this has really pushed the repo desk to the center. And then that repo desk, which was still living inside the relationship business, finishing at 12 and going for a lovely lunch with a broker, it has had to really, sorry, Jeff, has had to really transform completely. And I think that, but I would agree with you, Sal, that all the resistance which was, oh, no, the trader can't work from home, well, that's gone by the window. So now, a lot of the excuses that people had about why it couldn't be done, well, yeah, it has been done and it is being done. So you're gone. But I would say as well, one of the drivers as well is that if you want to look at being more effective, then you identify a solution. You need the ability to execute that solution, and that is electronic trading. Otherwise, you're relying on conversations, you're relying on negotiation, and your solution is not really a solution. Sorry, Camille, I keep interrupting.
So Camille, if you could just round up this first point before we get into regulation force solutions, would you say that the COVID pandemic has forced a kind of basic continuity planning event where people are going to be trading remotely, and technology has to provide the ability to do that, and the pipelines, the connections, the communications? I don't want to answer your whole answer.
Yeah, I think, as dreadful as this whole past 18 months nearly has been, there has been some, some life changes and some good things that are going to come out of it for all of us. I mean, the look at what's happened with the retail investors. Look at the whole GameStop phenomenon and how you've kind of got everybody trading out of their bedroom. So not just Wall Street, it's is it Main Street that you that you call it? Yeah. So I think there's kind of that shift. But we're going to talk about regulation and how that's driving change. But I think, yeah, everybody had these BCP scenarios where you go down once a year and you test that a few people can log on and everything works and the lights come on. But reality is that wasn't really scaled, and it's amazing how quickly we were able to transition the whole market really to our front rooms. And I think it won't ever go back exactly to how it was. And as we see more and more of these diverse entrants coming into the repo market, Sal was talking about, more buy side folk coming along, we need to have the infrastructure to support that growth and to support that continued business, I think.
That's great. And that does lead us into the second topic we wanted to cover, which was the regulation forced solutions that are technology. And I think, Sal, you wanted to make some points on that.
Well, when you bring up regulation, you may have put half the audience to sleep, but I'll make a comment that may wake them up, and it's probably going to make a few heads explode, but I personally feel regulation is a good thing. Those of us that have scars all over our body due to regulation in the industry and having to respond very quickly to it, that may be counterintuitive, but the goal of regulations to make markets and industries safer for those participating in it, as well as the individuals as well as the institutions. So overall, I believe they're a positive thing. They add cost, I guess, to your business, but good business figures out a way to come up with a solution that reduces the cost or makes it as minimally invasive as possible. And quite frankly, I think regulations probably helped many firms out there. GLMX in particular benefited from the increased cost capital that MiFID III brought to the industry. We had several buy-side accounts looking to increase their dealer coverage overnight and couldn't increase their headcount. So they looked at technology, and we were able to pivot into secured financing away from what we started with money market trading platform. The regulation itself, has had some negative, I guess, knock-on effects. Balance sheet is a very inflexible tool these days. Dealers not only have to abide by their levels on statement dates, but they also have to, many of them have daily averages that they have to abide by. And, it creates spikes sometimes in the marketplace. So we've seen that back in September of 2019. We've seen that in March of 2020 as everyone moved to home, and there was a big rush to buy high liquid securities as a safe haven. So there are obviously negative knock-on effects, but those knock-on effects drive more innovation. We've seen the FICC really kind of push and promote and develop their sponsored repo program. So the buy side now has an additional tool, I guess, in the toolbox to find liquidity, on these dates that funding spikes. We've seen the Global Peer Financing Association kind of take off. I think they have 15 to 20 members now. Again, another tool in the toolbox to circumvent the times where the dealers are struggling to provide balance sheet. And there's other regulation, as I think everyone is familiar with, and you'll probably hear on other panels today. But obviously SFTR was a big push. It pushed a lot of European banks onto electronic trading platforms. CDSR is going to be another one. Uncleared margin rules, yet another one. CDSR in particular, it's got that nasty, buy-in potential that kind of strikes fear in everyone. No one wants to have to go through buy-ins, and thankfully for Repo, I think it's 30 days and in is exempted, so that's a large part of the market. But there is still fear about failing, and as a result, you've seen Boney partner with Google Cloud to implement machine learning and AI to try to predict when fails will occur. I think they have some early success, something like they can predict 40% of fails, at a high level of accuracy. And the ability or the desire to have higher mobility in collateral, I think is helping the distributed ledger technology marketplace as well, so that you can move collateral across depositories easily. So overall, you're seeing regulation, the positive knock-on effects of regulation is driving innovation in the industry. And I would leave it with, with my earlier remarks about making the industry stronger. We've seen the spikes that I mentioned in funding, banks coming through fine. They weathered those storms okay. And we just recently had a large hedge fund that generated some very large losses for several banks, many banks actually. But there is no talk of liquidation or of those banks being hammered to the effect that we saw during the great financial crisis. So there are benefits there as well. I mean, I think if
you would think though that total return swap thing is going to cause the pendulum to swing back again, and we're going to see some new regulations.
My guess is yes. I mean, I think the opacity that TRS, or at least this one, one hedge fund was allowed to work behind and generate this leverage that was not tracked by a few firms, will push regulators to revisit that. Other swap products obviously are cleared. At a minimum, there'll be more transparency around total return swaps.
Camille, what are your thoughts about this whole move to AI and all these things that we're doing because of the regulations, which really actually started in 2008, 2009, 2010, and have just kept continuing?
I think love it or hate it, regulation is here to stay in various different guises, and transparency is one thing that I think there's going to be more and more of. The repo market has been fairly opaque. Sal and I have had a conversation this week about trying to work out market sizing, which is something that I've lost many hours to, because there are pockets of the industry where you can kind of get a view of what the sizing is, but there are pockets where you cannot. So it's very difficult to understand. And I think the more data, the better, and that's ultimately what the regulators are after. And for the market participants, more data, more opportunities to use AI has got to be a good thing to drive better trading decisions, and where spreads are already pretty small, anything that can help that is really gonna move the needle, I think. So I think we do have to look at it positively. CSDR, I know, is a big concern, and it is still somewhat up in the air what's going to happen around that buying piece. And I agree, it's a big worry. But I think there's elements of that regulation. Not that I want to bore everybody by spending too much time on regulation, so please bear with me. But there's part of it. So everybody talks about the buy-ins, and that's the thing that's up in lights, which is as it should be, because it's potentially has the most detrimental impact. But there's this other piece where you have fines, and I think there's something that's already been rolled out across, parts of the US market. And I think we're all kind of the opinion that that's a good thing. If we're encouraging better practice and we stop doing those silly things that could be avoided that cause trades to fail, then that actually that's another way that regulation is driving positive change. So I think there's we have to embrace it and do and use what we can, really.
Yeah, I think I agree with that last point. Just looking at treasuries, right? The TPMG putting in the 3% fail penalty, and everybody agreed with that. Thought it was a great idea. It got a little confusing when we went to negative rates, but did you want to add anything, Jerome, before we moved on to electronifying the life cycle of a trade?
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay, and I want to apologize here. I keep putting mute on because somebody is drilling in my building. It's annoying me, and I'm hoping you're not hearing it, but it's like a low drone that I can't get rid of unless I go up there and slam on his door. So on that note, I had talked a lot about this in the repo commentary, and I'm sure you guys all have seen that. I never do it as succinctly as we're going to do it here on the panel. And I'm sure there's 400 people nodding their heads in the audience. But I think this was a major impetus for repo technology, that we wanted to electronify the life cycle of the trade, from checking out documents, credit reporting, monitoring the trade, execution of the trade, settling the trade, all that stuff. And I know, Camille, you have a lot of thoughts on that, so I'll let you kick that off.
Thank you. Yeah, so where we sit in the market, well, we sit in obviously various different spots at Market Access, as you said at the outset, but specifically in repo, we sit in the post-trade space. So we're encouraging firms to automate the confirmation piece, kind of the bit that sits in the middle. And we've seen a shift in that in the last few years, where we've seen wider adoption particularly from the buy side, which kind of leads on from what we were saying earlier about how the buy side are getting more involved and changing the landscape of this market. But I think there's all these different steps, like you say, within repo. It's not, when you think about an outright trade, once the trade is done and it's settled and it's been reported and all of those things, that's it, it's done. Whereas there's all of these other things, and I think that's why repo market puzzles some people, unless you're in the weeds of it like we all are. But it goes back to my earlier point about technology and why that there are so many different steps and so many different places where something can go wrong. And I hear people talk about blockchain, and I think Sal even said distributed ledger technology earlier. He might have used the word, and it kind of makes me kind of go like that and just think, oh goodness, because I just think that would be fantastic if we could get there. And then we're hearing all these chats about the market moving to T1. SIFMA are talking about that, all great, but I just think we need to get our kind of the foundations right before we jump to the next phase of the journey.
Yeah, so you're talking about the back end, which people think is just simply settlement of a trade and then monitoring the trade, but there's trade monitoring for credit, there's trade monitoring for material adverse events, but there's also coupons, substitutions, margin calls, margin maintenance, dividends, warrants, voting, maturities of securities, and then there's obviously the fail situation. So there's an awful lot on the back. And then Sal, you were going to say something about the front end of electronifying the trade, right?
Yeah, and Camille, thank you for that. I think you provided a good description of what frustrates people with repo. I think I mentioned this to you the other day, but repo is a four-letter word, right? Depending on what's going on, and really, if you start thinking through the post-trade process that I know Market Access does a great job with, as well as Broadridge. But yeah, I mean, I think you want to live in the now, as Camille said, and blockchain has great great technology. It has great benefits, but it may take a while. It will take a while for us to get there, which is fine. But living in the now, living in today, I think there's a need to address all this life cycle inefficiency. And at point of trade, that can be accomplished as well, where if your process is electronified, you have the ability to, as you mentioned, handle all the life cycle events on a platform, like GLMX, where we straight through process those life cycle events, and we could SDP to your system or send it to a service like Camille has on post trade. But works well. But I do think that's the evolution. I know Jerome's platform has had in post trade and probably knows the ins and outs of trading and life cycle events for has done this for a long time. But the kind of next step that we see is handling that through a platform, having it feed to your system, having day one matched. For this industry to truly go electronic. And part of the reason why it's taken so long to get here, Camille, you had mentioned the frustration to get to this point, is because it's not just day one, right? We're not exchanging a treasury bill and cash and we both go our separate ways. There are two legs to these transactions, and then often there are multiple intermediate legs that go on as well. So you always have this persistent credit event, and tracking it can be challenging. And then you add, the potential of misbooking these trades, because Repo, for the most part, has lived on two separate people booking the same trade in different systems and hoping and praying that they both get it right, especially in a busy day. So for this to be a successful move electronic, you have to pay as much attention to the life cycle as you do to day one. I'll leave it there. I know Jerome wanted to jump in.
No, I think that, and I like how everything just flows, because we kind of said, there's clearly some changes that have happened in the repo market. They were slowed down for multiple reasons. Some of the obstacles have disappeared. The regulation has created change to the business models, and, for example, pushed a lot of the buy side to do a lot more on repo. And I think that when the buy side is coming, very often that is when the complexity of the post trade of repo is much more important, because they're not used to dealing with it, and it brings a lot of new challenges. And so that electronification of the post trading process is very important, brought in by that peer-to-peer processing. They're not experts as managing that. On the sell side, you had a similar kind of push, which is more related to centralizing management of collateral because of Basel III, and having a better focus on that. But all that brought to that strong focus on electronification of the post-trade life cycle.
Right, and I think, Jerome, some of that is going to be covered by the RegTech panel that follows us, some of the stuff for the Basel III. Going back to you, Sal, I didn't want to leave out that there is that really front part, right, before the trade's actually executed. What's your take on documentation being, slimmed down, or being one document for all, or credit monitoring or credit assessment? And do you monitor the trades after they're on, and how much is left in the line, and all that? And how do you quote the quotes?
So as far as a single doc goes, again, talking about scars of my days at investment banks, there's a whole industry around negotiating documentation that is not going away anytime soon. But I don't see a single doc. Maybe they'll, as you mentioned, there is some technology around negotiating 95% of the doc, and then the 5% are left to the lawyers to come in to drag on for months or years. But as far as you bring up the ability to monitor credit. I mean, credit is just such a big component to repo, right? I mean, and financing, and now with more regulations, I hate to bring that up. It's a key component to capital calculation. So platforms, our platform does we have direct connectivity. We set up with our end users. They can share their credit information in real time. Or they can put static data in the platform, right? So if they have fixed limits that they want to set, we see all of our big users doing that, where they'll limit the counterparties' total notional that they can trade, or put haircuts around specific collateral to prevent that from happening. There's talk about sanctioned securities and industry push around that, where we'll limit those securities. We have fat finger controls as well. So a lot of controls around trading on a platform like ours. Nice to have, sure, but have to have definitely. So there's a lot that you can do that is being done as the protocols evolve, as D2C trading evolves. You need technology that's flexible to handle that.
Great. That's a good wrap on that topic. I want to move on to our last topic, which is collateral optimization. We're not going to hit on big data analysis, and we'll leave RegTech to the RegTech panel, and we're probably not going to get into cyber attacks and all that stuff. But I really do want to talk about collateral optimization, which is probably one of the most widely used phrases now in our industry. And it refers to a suite of services in which firms source, manage, substitute, and pledge eligible collateral assets in the most cost-effective manner, while meeting various liquidity and risk management demands by both sides. And I think you were kicking us off, Jerome. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, the usual. Oh my God, I'm on mute problem. Right. So I think when we discussed that, I said that from my perspective, in my conversations with people about optimization, I always say that there are at least 3 different levels, and it's very arbitrary, but 3 different levels when looking at optimization. And the first one is the operational problem of effectively selecting the assets that will need to be either recalled or pledged as part of the daily basis. So it used to be the cheapest to deliver, and leverage ratio and capital cost, funding cost have meant that it's no longer the cheapest to deliver. It's whatever the cheapest for you to deliver. And so that is the first level of optimization in my mind that people look at implementing. And that brings into the second level of optimization, which is in general what I see much more, which is that the repo desk are evolving into a collateral trading desk, where they look at collateral as a really scarce resource that needs to be managed correctly across all the different users of it, and that means effectively handling the term structure as well of the obligations, and so doing things such as CSA pricing and trading collateral, finding out exactly what's available in the market, and looking at whether it makes sense to actually bring in collateral in specific terms against some exposures. So, for example, derivatives portfolio have got a much longer lifetime in general than repo, and so you can actually reduce your funding cost of collateral by going there in terms. And that's really the second level, and which is occurring. And it's not related necessarily to the first level, because it gives you a view of exactly what is it that you should be pushing out. And in optimization, the critical element is always to discover what your true objective is, and adapt it and change it, knowing exactly what your position is, but then also discovering what your true objectives are, depending on what your funding costs are, what your capital targets are, etc. And that leads to the third level, which is really taking one step above and starting looking at balance sheet optimization. So looking at, and that electronification we were talking about of the execution and also of the STP is paramount to that, because you need to establish, so you look across all the different activities that you have, and you effectively allocate balance sheet resources such as leverage ratio, such as capital, such as funding, in order to maximize the business opportunities of your business. And I think that it's very important, in my mind, when you talk about collateral optimization, to understand exactly which one of these three objectives people are looking for. But the electronification becomes critical for streamlining across these three levels of optimization.
That's good. Very well described. And anything to follow on that, Sal? I feel I haven't heard from Camille in a while.
Yeah, no, Jerome, you did a very good job describing the challenges succinctly. But as you probably know firsthand, making it happen is a bear of a project, because for you to do it completely, you're breaking through silos, you're breaking through businesses that are still compensated on providing the best return. So they're not necessarily going to work nicely with each other, I think, as all of us know from our days at investment banks. So we've seen.
So who does that cost benefit analysis? Is it somebody higher up? Is the problem that you're talking to traders, they don't want to lose jobs because they're being optimized, or you're talking to repo desk managers? Does it have to be somebody at the CFO level or the treasurer who sees the whole balance sheet optimization picture?
Yeah, I do believe it has to be. And we took on this project when I was at B of A back in 2005. And, it was a lot of kicking and screaming by business heads. But ultimately, the initiative came down from the head of capital markets, which provided, enough of a stick to make good progress. We're probably still working on that today. But you're seeing firms combining prime broker with repo, with sec lending, in order to bring all these businesses together, or many of these businesses together, in order to really kind of fulfill that collateral optimization goal. But then when you look broader into a bank, you have treasury functions, you have other groups that don't fall into that. So as you said, it's got to come from the top.
And one of the issue, which I find very funny, is that it is a fairly big effort to implement optimization, and but once you actually provide that optimization, most of the participants are saying, well, you're just doing your job, so why should I pay you to just do your job well? Which is, so it's not only implementing optimization, it's also making sure that you have a funding mechanisms for it on an ongoing basis to happen, because otherwise, as soon as you are providing an optimal service, then most of the other desks, most of the other businesses are saying, well, I'm expecting you to do a good job, so yeah, that's what optimization is. So yeah.
It's basically just everything you're saying is about being more efficient, increasing efficiency. So whether it's cross-function, having a view of what your positions are across the bank, across the organization, and not just, like you were saying, Jerome, what's cheapest to deliver. There's a whole wrap of other things that go into it, right? Like, and where can we use AI to help us to figure that out as well? We can't have people just sitting manually trying to figure out what collateral to allocate to something. That just doesn't really wash anymore, does it?
Yeah, and I think the panel on future tech is going to cover that, because one way of looking at it is that there's a lot of if you look at balance sheet optimization and you have somebody sitting in front of big levers, where do I allocate my capital? Where do I allocate my funding and capability across my different business? Where do I allocate leverage ratio, which is really a specific, credit as well? Where do I allocate credit? Then after that, most of it through technology could be facilitated. And what you would have is, instead of having sales and traders, you'd have relationship managers, and you'd have people looking at exceptions and doing exception management. You have a trading strategy on low touch. I mean, we can see that all that technology being there. It's just what we were talking about. It's just very slow moving.
Yeah.
Right. And this brings in that big data analysis too, right, Camille? So in post-trade land, to try to do this kind of optimization, it would be great to have the AI or the machine learning that can go back and look at this data that maybe some of the traders and salespeople and managers can't, and have the technology actually provide the data and source through the data to find the optimal solution.
I mean, that's kind of, you're kind of describing what we've done at Market Access on the credit trading side, and where we've used the data that comes into our post-trade engine for, cash bond trades, and we take that and we're able to then put that on our trading screens, which helps forms the credit traders to make decisions based on prices and volumes that they wouldn't otherwise see. So yeah, I mean, more data the better is it would be my summary.
That's an interesting thing as well, because in general, when working on machine learning projects, the critical element on any machine learning project is the data. You never have enough data. There was an interesting article that explains that if you have to choose between more processing power or smarter algorithms or more data, you're going to get between tenfold and 100-fold more value out of more data and better quality data than you're going to do out of anything else. So yeah,
that's very interesting. Well, we have actually covered all of our topics and even got a little bit into big data analysis. I don't want to go too far into next gen technologies and take all the thunder out of the following panels, but I think this has been a lively discussion. I'm looking at my serve. I don't see any questions from the audience. Do we have any questions coming in? No one has asked any questions yet.
well,
I don't know if that's good or bad.
That's because we've been very, very clear and very informative. So no doubt.
Thank you. I agree, Jerome. And I really appreciate the panel. Jumping in, we had our own ideas where it would go, but I like it that it was even more free forming and free flowing.
I think one of the topics of our panel was trends, and I think we clearly laid out that technology is a core part of financing desks today. Back when I started, it was early days of spreadsheets and manual entry. And when I was at Smith Barney, we had a group of inputters, right? That's their job all day. They got a trade ticket and they put it in and put the trades in and left at 4 o'clock every day. And you move forward to having trading systems that were new around 2000 that did the basic functionality, and they evolved to be big companies today. You had the technology or innovation around FIT 41 netting, where the FICC was able to step in and allow the industry to grow exponentially from there. And then you move forward to platforms and services that Camille offers. Obviously, Broadridge has been front and center with technology throughout, and moving forward, GLMX providing kind of a central platform where we've touched on a lot of topics that provide technology or a digital bridge, let's say, that connects some of the great internal technology to each other to allow you to source collateral more efficiently, to gather that data that kind of goes by the wayside, that is lost in Bloomberg chats or on phone calls. And then from there, as you mentioned, the sky's the limit.
Right.
Yeah, and I think just to pick up on that, just to end on something forward-looking, and if I had a crystal ball, which I don't, but if I was looking to the where repo markets are going to go, I would put a bet on that they're going to grow, and not just regionally. I think they're going to grow globally. You look around at the moment, and there's clearly excess of cash rolling around, and I think repo is certainly an obvious place for that cash to sit. But I don't think it can keep growing unless it has the infrastructure, that to support it is adopted widely. So, but I think we're heading in the right direction, albeit not as quick as we would like.
Right.
But that's what we're all here for. So
Camille,
We're supposed to get that extra push.
Camille, you know how we know you don't have a crystal ball? Because you're on this call with us. You'd be on the beach somewhere.
That's right.
I'd like to be able to get anywhere. We're not allowed to go anywhere yet.
That's the old, I've never seen the headline, psychic wins lottery.
But one of the other thing as well is, for me, everything that we said about technology and the impact it has and how it's going to be an enabler is great. But I want to say that what it is that it's necessarily replacing the people who are capturing the tickets and necessarily covering over the breaks inside the STP flow, and facilitating the execution, but actually consuming more brain power to think correctly about what is it you're trying to achieve, what is it you're trying to do, what is your business, and facilitating that flow. So making it less, removing all the things that are actually stopping things from flowing. So for me, repo is a conduit. It enables financing across, transfer of financing, not necessarily a place to park the cash. And I think the regulators and the central banks are really going to fight against repo as a placeholder, but really as a way of financing. And I think that the trouble is that it's not fulfilling necessarily its increased function without technology facilitating that flow, pre-trade, post-trade, across peer-to-peer transactions. So looking at credit and looking at managing credit and interest rate for peer-to-peer, providing indemnification. That whole thing, it's all about facilitating it and making it more streamlined, which is absolutely required because of the critical importance of repo now. Unsecured funding, I don't think so. Secured funding is everything, and that's what repo needs to be. So,
Right. I can't believe I've gone a whole panel and not said peer-to-peer. Of course, now I did. I think. Well, I'm happy that all of our people out there joined us. Oh, I see our leader is back on.
Thank you very much. Someone mentioned I'd prefer to be on the beach, crystal ball, and I thought that's my cue to step in. Thank you very much for this fantastic panel. Thank you, Camille. Thank you, Jérôme. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, you and I need to talk about where you get the cream from, because I want that skin. I want that flow. I want that youthfulness. All I
It's the sun right outside.
My mother just sent me a message saying, get your tie straight. How can you say that? More importantly, I will pick up one point if you allow me, and I won't. One of you will know which panel came from. This came from. Fairly big effort to optimize. Fairly big effort to optimize, and we've all been involved in these projects, whether they're peer to something else, or peer to something else, or peer to C, or beyond the interdealer space. And it has always been this big challenge. Scary because it is a big effort and there is no way around it. And you can't just look at the end without looking at the beginning. But I must say I've been very impressed by all your interventions on that point, in a sense saying, right, we are here now to help you. So I will, on that note, I will advise a growing number of, Justin, how are we doing this? I mean, it's incredible. We're not far. I can't give you numbers, but we're on the way to 6 figures here, and 5 figures. But to go and visit our sponsors. All these discussions will be available online at the end of these conference, and I will join you for a panel which has been pointed at a number of times during this panel, which is RegTech. Thank you very much. Thank you, and speak to you soon.